The first shot rang out just as Abigail Walters realized her life in Silver Creek was built on lies. Her 6-month pregnant belly a testament to promises her husband Thomas had no intention of keeping. She stood frozen in the doorway of their modest homestead, watching as Thomas tumbled backward from the saloon bed, the half-dressed saloon girl screaming as she scrambled for cover. It was 1878, and the mining town of Silver Creek, Colorado was unforgiving to a woman with no family, no money, and a child on the way. Abigail had ridden into town that afternoon after receiving an anonymous note about her husband's whereabouts. She never expected to find him in the arms of Daisy May, the town's most notorious woman of ill repute. "Abby, this isn't," Thomas stammered, blood blooming across his shirt from where the angry saloon owner's bullet had grazed him during the ensuing chaos. Abigail didn't wait to hear his excuses. She turned and fled, her boots kicking up dust on the main street as tears blurred her vision. 3 years of marriage to a man who promised her the world, only to leave her alone for weeks at a time, prospecting. Now she understood where he'd really been. "Mrs. Walters," a deep voice called after her. "Mrs. Walters, wait." She didn't stop until a gentle but firm hand caught her elbow. Turning, she found herself looking up into the concerned face of Zachary Garrett, owner of the Double G Ranch outside of town. His broad shoulders blocked the setting sun, casting his face in shadow beneath his worn Stetson. "You shouldn't be running in your condition, madam," he said, his voice gentler than his weathered appearance would suggest. "I need to go," she whispered, suddenly aware of the spectacle she was creating in the middle of the street. Silver Creek was small enough that by morning, every soul would know of Thomas Walters' infidelity and his pregnant wife's humiliation. "At least let me drive you home," Zachary offered, nodding toward his wagon. "It's getting dark, and it's 3 miles to your place." Abigail hesitated. She barely knew Zachary Garrett beyond purchasing supplies at his trading post and the occasional greeting in town. He was respected but kept to himself, running cattle on 5,000 acres with only a handful of ranch hands. Widowed young, according to town gossip, with no children. "I can't go back there," she realized aloud. The homestead belonged to Thomas. Without him, she had nothing. Zachary's expression softened with understanding. "Then let me take you somewhere safe for the night. You can figure things out in the morning." That night, Abigail slept in the spare room of Mrs. Landry's boarding house, courtesy of Zachary's arrangement and payment. She laid awake until dawn, one hand on her swollen belly, wondering how everything had gone so terribly wrong. By noon the next day, the entire town knew that Thomas Walters had fled Silver Creek, taking what little money they had saved and leaving behind a mountain of debt. The bank would be claiming their homestead within the month. "He left you nothing?" Mrs. Landry asked incredulously as she poured Abigail tea in the boarding house kitchen. "Less than nothing," Abigail replied bitterly. "I'm in debt to half the merchants in town for supplies he purchased on credit." "What will you do, dear, with the baby coming?" The question hung in the air, impossible to answer. In 1878 Colorado, a woman alone had few options, and fewer still for one in her condition. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Mrs. Landry returned moments later with Zachary Garrett behind her, his hat in his hands. "Mrs. Walters," he said with a formal nod, "I've come to make you a proposition." Abigail stiffened, immediately wary. She'd had enough of men's propositions. Seeming to understand her reaction, Zachary quickly continued, "I need a housekeeper at the ranch. The place is falling apart since my last one left to get married. It's honest work with fair pay, and you'd have your own cabin, at least until you decide what's next. Mr. Garrett, I appreciate your offer, but I'm hardly in a condition to be keeping house," she said, gesturing to her belly. "You've still got 3 months, by my count. And after that, well, a baby is no trouble. My mother raised 5 of us and kept a cleaner house than anyone in the county." He paused. "It's just a temporary solution, Mrs. Walters. But winter's coming, and you need somewhere to go." It was the kindest offer she was likely to get. By sunset, Abigail had packed her few belongings and was bouncing along in Zachary's wagon toward the Double G Ranch. The ranch was larger than she expected, a sprawling main house built of sturdy logs, a barn, bunkhouse, and several outbuildings. To the east sat a small cabin, smoke curling from its chimney. "That'll be yours," Zachary said, following her gaze. My foreman lit a fire to warm it up. It's simple but sound. The cabin was indeed simple, one room with a small stove, a bed, table, and 2 chairs. But it was clean, with colorful curtains at the windows and a quilt on the bed that looked handmade. This is more than generous, Abigail said, genuine gratitude in her voice. We eat breakfast at sunrise and supper at dusk, Zachary explained. The men take lunch in the bunkhouse. You'll be responsible for cooking, cleaning the main house, and laundry. Sundays are yours to rest. When would you like me to start? Tomorrow is soon enough. Get settled tonight. As Zachary turned to leave, Abigail called after him. Why are you helping me, Mr. Garrett? He paused at the door, his expression unreadable in the fading light. Because someone once helped me when I needed it. Rest well, Mrs. Walters. The first weeks at the Double G were harder than Abigail anticipated. Her back ached constantly, and the morning sickness she thought she'd left behind occasionally returned with a vengeance. But she worked diligently, determined to earn her keep. Zachary was fair but distant, spending his days working with the cattle and his evenings in his study with ledgers. The ranch hands were respectful, if curious about her situation. No one mentioned Thomas or asked about the baby's father, for which she was grateful. December arrived with bitter cold and heavy snow. Abigail had just finished washing the breakfast dishes when a sharp pain doubled her over. She gripped the edge of the sink, breathing hard as it passed. Mrs. Walters? Zachary stood in the kitchen doorway, concern etched on his face. Are you unwell? Just the baby moving, she lied, not wanting to worry him. But another pain hit, stronger this time, and she couldn't hide her wince. That's not movement, he said firmly, crossing to her side. How long has this been happening? Since last night, she admitted. But it's too early. The baby isn't due until February. Zachary's expression grew serious. I'm getting Doc Miller. The pass will be snowed in, I'll get through, he said with quiet confidence, already reaching for his coat. James will stay with you until I return. James, the elderly foreman, kept watch as Abigail's pains intensified. By the time Zachary returned with the doctor 6 hours later, she was crying out with each contraction. The baby's coming now, Doc Miller announced after examining her. Too early. Yes, but there's nothing to be done about that. What followed was the longest night of Abigail's life. The pain was beyond anything she'd imagined, and fear for her child consumed her. Through it all, to her surprise, Zachary remained. Not in the room, but just outside her door, bringing water, stoking the fire, and occasionally offering awkward words of encouragement. As dawn broke over the snow-covered landscape, Abigail's daughter entered the world with a thin, reedy cry. She's small, but she's fighting, Doc Miller said as he placed the tiny, red-faced infant in Abigail's arms. Keep her warm and feed her often. That's all we can do. Exhausted but overjoyed, Abigail gazed down at her daughter's perfect face. Hello, Emma, she whispered, the name she'd chosen months ago slipping naturally from her lips. When Doc Miller left the room to wash up, Zachary appeared in the doorway, his expression a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Would you like to meet her? Abigail asked softly. He approached slowly, as if afraid he might frighten the baby. When he looked down at Emma, something in his weathered face changed, softened. She's beautiful, he said simply. Like her mother. The compliment, spoken so earnestly, brought unexpected tears to Abigail's eyes. In the days that followed, Zachary proved himself to be more than just an employer. He arranged for Mrs. Peterson from town to help Abigail while she recovered, made sure she had everything she needed for Emma, and even constructed a cradle that he placed beside her bed. You didn't have to do all this, Abigail told him one evening as they sat by the fire, Emma sleeping peacefully in her cradle. I know what it's like to be alone when you need someone most, he replied, his eyes on the flames. My wife died of fever 5 years ago. We'd only been married 8 months. It was the first time he'd mentioned his wife, and Abigail sensed it wasn't a subject he discussed often. I'm sorry for your loss. He nodded in acknowledgement. What will you do when spring comes? The question caught her off guard. She hadn't thought beyond surviving the winter and keeping Emma healthy. I don't know, she admitted. Find work somewhere, I suppose. You could stay, he said, still not looking at her. The position is permanent, if you want it. That's very kind, But I can't impose. It's not imposition if I'm asking, Zachary interrupted, finally meeting her gaze. Emma should have a stable home. The sincerity in his blue eyes made her heart flutter in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. Thank you. I'll consider it. As winter gave way to spring, Abigail and Emma settled into life at the Double G. Emma grew stronger each day, her smile lighting up the room and wrapping everyone around her tiny finger, especially Zachary. To Abigail's surprise, the stern rancher revealed a gentle side with Emma. He would hold her while Abigail cooked, tell her stories about the ranch animals, and rock her to sleep when she was fussy. The transformation was remarkable. "You're good with her," Abigail observed one evening as Zachary carefully placed a sleeping Emma in her cradle. "She makes it easy," he replied with a small smile. "Smart little thing. Gets that from you." The compliment warmed her from within. Over the months, something had changed between them, a cautious friendship built on mutual respect and shared responsibility for Emma. One Sunday in May, Zachary suggested they take Emma for her first picnic by the creek that ran through the ranch property. The day was perfect warm sunshine, wildflowers dotting the grass, and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine. As they spread a blanket beneath an old cottonwood tree, Abigail felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. Emma, now 5 months old, lay on her back, cooing at the leaves rustling overhead. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Zachary said as they finished their meal. He seemed uncharacteristically nervous, picking at a loose thread on the blanket. "What is it?" "People in town are talking." "About Emma." He cleared his throat. "About who her father is." Abigail's happiness dimmed. "People will always talk. They're saying Thomas isn't her father. That's why he left." "That's not true," she said sharply. "Thomas is her father. He left because he's a coward who couldn't face his responsibilities." Zachary nodded slowly. "I figured as much. But it got me thinking." He took a deep breath. "What if I claimed her?" Abigail stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "What? What if I said I was Emma's father? Not to take her from you," he added quickly, "but to give her my name. Protection. A future. Why would you do that?" "Because I care about her. About both of you." His voice was steady, his gaze direct. "Because she deserves better than to grow up with whispers and rumors following her." Abigail was speechless. The offer was beyond generous, it was life-changing. But it was also complicated. "People would think I was. That we." "They already do," he said gently. "Half the town believes we've been together since before Thomas left. The other half thinks we're together now. But we're not," she whispered, though something in her chest tightened at the admission. "No," he agreed. "We're not. But we could be." The words hung between them, fraught with possibility. Abigail looked at Emma, then back at Zachary's earnest face. "Are you asking to court me, Mr. Garrett?" A slow smile spread across his face. "I believe I am, Mrs. Walters. If you'll have me." Her heart raced. This wasn't how she'd imagined her life unfolding. But then, nothing had gone according to plan since the day she caught Thomas with Daisy May. "I think," she said carefully, "that I would like that very much." Their courtship was proper but swift. By June, Zachary was joining them for supper every evening, sometimes bringing wildflowers or a small toy he'd carved for Emma. They spoke of everything: his childhood in Missouri, her dreams of becoming a teacher before she met Thomas, their favorite books, and their hopes for the future. With each conversation, each shared laugh, each moment watching him with Emma, Abigail felt the walls around her heart crumbling. "He loves you, you know," Mrs. Peterson remarked one afternoon as she helped Abigail hang laundry. "Anyone with eyes can see it." "We've only been courting a few months," Abigail protested, though her cheeks warmed at the observation. "Some things don't need time, just the right people," the older woman replied wisely. That evening, as they walked along the creek after putting Emma to bed, Zachary took Abigail's hand in his. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice unusually serious. "A dangerous pastime," she teased, trying to lighten his mood. He smiled briefly before continuing. "I want to adopt Emma legally. Make her my daughter in the eyes of the law." Abigail's breath caught. "Zach." "But I want to do it right." He stopped walking and turned to face her, still holding her hand. "Abigail Walters, I know this isn't the most romantic setting, and I'm not the most poetic man. But I love you. I love Emma as if she were my own. And I want us to be a family, proper and true." Tears filled her eyes as he knelt before her, pulling a small ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a single pearl. "Will you marry me?" The answer came easily, as natural as breathing. Yes. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Silver Creek, Emma wearing a lace dress Zachary had ordered all the way from Denver. The entire town turned out for the celebration, any lingering gossip silenced by the obvious happiness of the bride and groom. That night, after Emma was asleep in her cradle in what was now their home, Abigail stood nervously in the bedroom doorway. Despite everything they'd been through together, this step felt monumental. Zachary seemed to sense her anxiety. "We can wait, if you're not ready," he said gently. "No," she replied, moving closer to him. "I want this. I want you." His kiss was tender at first, then deepening with a passion that made her dizzy. As they learned each other's bodies beneath the quilt his mother had made, Abigail realized that what she felt for Zachary was unlike anything she'd experienced before, built on trust, respect, and genuine love rather than youthful infatuation. In the quiet aftermath, as they lay intertwined, Zachary whispered, "I never thought I'd have this again. A family. Someone to love." "Neither did I," she admitted, trailing her fingers along his chest. "Thank you for giving us a home." "You gave me far more," he replied, kissing her forehead. "You gave me purpose again." The legal adoption of Emma was finalized in August. Judge Harrison made the trip from Denver himself, having known Zachary's father years before. From this day forward, the judge announced in their living room, "This child shall be known as Emma Garrett, daughter of Zachary and Abigail Garrett, with all rights and privileges thereto." As they signed the papers, Abigail caught Zachary wiping away a tear, the first she'd ever seen him shed. "She's officially yours now," she said softly as they watched Emma playing on the floor with wooden blocks. "She always was," he replied. "From the moment I saw her." Life settled into a happy rhythm. The Double G prospered under Zachary's careful management, and Abigail found herself increasingly involved in the business side of the ranch. Her education, unusual for a woman in those days, proved valuable as she kept the books and corresponded with buyers. Emma grew into a lively toddler with her mother's golden curls and a smile that could melt the hardest heart. She followed Zachary everywhere, perched on his shoulders as he inspected the herd or helping him in the barn. No one who saw them together would ever question that she was his daughter in every way that mattered. On Emma's second birthday, as they celebrated with a small party at the ranch, a stranger rode up to the main house. Abigail watched from the porch as Zachary went to meet him, their conversation too distant to hear. When Zachary returned, his expression was grim. "What is it?" she asked, anxiety instantly rising. "Thomas is back," he said quietly, mindful of the children playing nearby. "He's in town, asking about you and Emma." Abigail felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. "What does he want?" "According to Jim Watson at the general store, he's telling anyone who'll listen that I stole his wife and child." Zachary's jaw tightened. "He's claiming he wants you back." "That's ridiculous," Abigail said, anger replacing her initial fear. "He abandoned us. He has no rights to Emma. You legally adopted her." "I know that, but he's making quite a scene. Sheriff Tanner sent word that we should come to town, settle this properly." Abigail looked at Emma, happily showing her new doll to the foreman's granddaughter. "I won't have him disrupting her life." "He won't," Zachary promised, his voice hard with determination. "I'll make sure of it." The next day, they rode into Silver Creek together, leaving Emma safely at the ranch with Mrs. Peterson. As their wagon approached the main street, Abigail spotted Thomas immediately standing outside the saloon, looking much as he had the day he left, perhaps a bit thinner and more weathered. Her heart, which once would have raced at the sight of him, remained steady. Any feelings she'd had for Thomas had died long ago. Sheriff Tanner met them at the hitching post. "Glad you came. He's been causing a ruckus since yesterday. Claims you took advantage of his absence to steal his family." "That's a lie," Abigail said firmly. "He abandoned us when I was 6 months pregnant. Left me with nothing but debt." "I know, madam. Everyone in town knows. But he's demanding to be heard." Zachary helped Abigail down from the wagon, his hand protectively at the small of her back. "Then let's hear him out and be done with it." They entered the sheriff's office to find Thomas seated across from the desk, a smug expression on his face that faltered slightly when he saw them together. Abby, he said, standing. You're looking well. It's Mrs. Garrett now, she replied coldly. What do you want, Thomas? I want what's mine, he said, glancing between her and Zachary. My wife. My child. You forfeited any claim to either of them when you ran off with Daisy May's money box, Sheriff Tanner interjected. Left them destitute, from what I heard. Thomas had the grace to look embarrassed. I made mistakes. I'm here to make things right. It's too late for that, Abigail said. I've divorced you and remarried. Emma has been legally adopted by my husband. There's nothing here for you anymore. The law, Thomas began. The law is quite clear, interrupted Judge Harrison, who had entered behind them. I'm passing through on my way back to Denver and heard there was a dispute. Mrs. Garrett obtained a divorce on grounds of abandonment. The adoption papers for Emma Garrett are properly filed and binding. Thomas's face darkened. This isn't right. You can't just take a man's family. You gave them up, Zachary said, speaking for the first time, his voice dangerously quiet. You left them with nothing. I didn't take them from you. I gave them what you wouldn't: a home, security, love. What would you know about it? Thomas sneered. Playing father to another man's child before he could finish, Zachary had him by the collar, backing him against the wall. Emma is my daughter in every way that matters. I was there when she took her first steps, said her first words. I've rocked her to sleep every night for 2 years. Where were you, Zach? Abigail said softly, laying a hand on his arm. He's not worth it. Slowly, Zachary released Thomas, who straightened his jacket with shaking hands. You have no legal claim here, Mr. Walters, Judge Harrison said firmly. I suggest you move on before you find yourself facing charges for causing a disturbance. Thomas looked from the judge to the sheriff, then to Abigail and Zachary, standing united. Whatever fight had brought him back drained away, leaving only a bitter shell of the charming man Abigail had once loved. Fine, he muttered. Keep your happy little family. I was only trying to do the right thing. 3 years too late, Abigail replied, turning away from him. Goodbye, Thomas. They left him there in the sheriff's office, walking arm in arm back to their wagon. The encounter had been difficult, but as they drove home to Emma, Abigail felt only relief. Are you all right? Zachary asked as the town disappeared behind them. Yes, she answered truthfully. Seeing him just confirmed what I already knew, that leaving him was the best thing that ever happened to me. It led me to you. His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. I thank God for that every day. When they arrived home, Emma ran to meet them, her little arms outstretched. Papa, Mama. Zachary scooped her up, holding her close as if to reassure himself she was still there, still his. Over Emma's curly head, his eyes met Abigail's, filled with a love so pure it took her breath away. Let's go home, he said, reaching for Abigail's hand. And they did, the three of them together, a family forged not by blood but by choice, by love, and by the courage to believe in second chances. 5 years later, the Double G Ranch had doubled in size, becoming one of the most prosperous operations in the county. Emma, now 7, had been joined by 2 brothers, Jacob, 4, and Benjamin, just learning to walk. On the 10th anniversary of the day Zachary had offered Abigail shelter from the storm of her first marriage, they stood together on the porch of their expanded home, watching their children play in the yard. Do you ever regret it? Abigail asked, leaning against his solid warmth. Taking in a pregnant woman you barely knew? Raising another man's child as your own? Zachary turned to her, the years having added silver to his temples, but only deepening the love in his eyes. Not for a single moment. Emma may not have my blood, but she has my heart, just like you. Just like the boys. We've been blessed, she murmured. Beyond measure, he agreed, kissing her softly. And it all started because you were brave enough to walk away from a life that was hurting you, and I was lucky enough to be there when you did. As the setting sun painted the Colorado sky in shades of gold and crimson, Abigail Garrett knew that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with love at first sight, but with kindness in the darkest hour, and that family isn't always about who you're born to, but who stands beside you when you need it most.